The roar of motorcycle engines echoed down the street when a little boy suddenly stepped in front of the bikes, tears running down his face. With a trembling voice, he didn't beg for food, money, or even safety. He begged them to kill his stepdad. What those bikers did next stunned everyone who witnessed it. Stay with me until the end, because this story will leave you speechless. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Most people would drive right past a crying child on the street. Most people would assume someone else would handle it. Most people would mind their own business. But these weren't most people. These were members of the Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club, and they lived by one unbreakable rule: protect those who cannot protect themselves. It was a cold Tuesday evening in November when everything changed. The Brotherhood was riding back from their weekly charity run, delivering food to homeless shelters across 3 counties. Their leather jackets bore patches that told stories of brotherhood, loyalty, and honor. To outsiders, they looked dangerous. To those who knew them, they were guardians. Marcus, the club president, was leading the pack when he saw something that made his blood freeze. A small figure stood directly in their path, arms raised, forcing 15 motorcycles to come to a screeching halt. The boy couldn't have been older than 8 years old. His clothes were torn, his face was bruised, and his eyes held a desperation that no child should ever know. The silence that followed was deafening. 15 engines cut out simultaneously as the bikers realized what they were seeing. This wasn't just any child. This was a child in crisis. A child who had reached the point where strangers on motorcycles seemed like his only hope. Marcus removed his helmet slowly, his weathered face showing concern that ran deeper than words. He had seen violence. He had seen pain. But nothing had prepared him for what this little boy was about to ask him. Tommy, as they would later learn his name, approached Marcus with shaking hands. In his small fist, he clutched 11 crumpled dollar bills, probably every cent he had managed to save or find. His voice was barely a whisper, but his words cut through the evening air like a blade. "Please, mister," Tommy said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I need you to make my stepdad go away forever. He hurts me and my mama every night when he drinks. Last night was the worst yet, and I'm scared he's gonna kill us." The Brotherhood exchanged glances that spoke volumes. These were men who had seen combat, who had faced down threats that would terrify ordinary people, but a child's plea for help hit them harder than any enemy ever could. Marcus knelt down to Tommy's eye level, his massive frame folding carefully so as not to intimidate the already frightened boy. "Son," he said gently, "what's your name, and where do you live?" "Tommy Patterson," the boy replied. "We live in the blue house on Elm Street, the one with the broken fence. My stepdad, he comes home drunk every night and starts hitting. Mama tries to protect me, but he's too strong. Yesterday, he threw a bottle at her head and said next time he'd use something worse." The details that poured out of Tommy's mouth painted a picture of horror that no child should ever experience. He described nights spent hiding in closets, mornings cleaning blood off the kitchen floor, and the constant fear that today might be the day his stepdad finally went too far. Thunder, the club's vice president, and a former military police officer stepped forward. His trained eye immediately noticed signs that confirmed Tommy's story. The boy's injuries weren't from playground accidents. They were systematic, deliberate, and recent. "Tommy," Thunder said carefully, "how did you know to find us?" "I've seen you guys around town," Tommy explained. "People say you're dangerous, that you hurt bad people. My stepdad is a bad person, so I thought maybe you could stop him. I saved up all my allowance money from before he moved in with us. It's all I have." The innocence in that statement broke something inside each of those hardened men. An 8-year-old boy had walked miles in the dark, risked his safety, and offered everything he owned because he believed these strangers were his only chance at survival. Marcus looked at the crumpled bills in Tommy's outstretched hand. $11. To most people, it was barely enough for a fast food meal. To this child, it represented hope, desperation, and a trust that adults would do the right thing when it mattered most. "Tommy," Marcus said slowly, "we need to talk about this differently. What you're asking us to do, that's not how we solve problems. But that doesn't mean we can't help you." The disappointment that flashed across Tommy's face was heartbreaking. He had mustered every ounce of courage he possessed, walked into what he thought was danger, and offered everything he had. Now it seemed like even these intimidating bikers couldn't save him. "But if you can't make him go away," Tommy whispered, "what's gonna happen to me and Mama? He said if we ever tell anyone, he'll make sure we disappear. He said nobody would believe us anyway because he's got friends at work who think he's a good guy." That's when Sledge, the club's enforcer, spoke up. "Kid, we didn't say we couldn't help. We said we don't solve problems the way you're thinking. But there are other ways to make sure bad people can't hurt good people anymore." The Brotherhood had dealt with situations like this before. They knew the system often failed children like Tommy. They knew that sometimes the law moved too slowly. Bureaucracy got in the way, and by the time official help arrived, it was often too late. But they also knew something else. They knew that sometimes, when the system fails, good people have to step up and create their own justice. Not the kind Tommy was thinking of, but a kind that was far more permanent and far more effective. Marcus made a decision that would change everything for Tommy, his mother, and everyone involved. "Tommy," he said, standing up and placing a protective hand on the boy's shoulder, "keep your money. We're going to help you. But first we need to make sure you and your mama are safe tonight. Then we're going to make sure your stepdad never hurts anyone ever again." The relief in Tommy's eyes was immediate and overwhelming. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt like someone was finally listening, finally believing him, and finally strong enough to stand between him and the monster that had been destroying his family. What happened next would become legendary in their small town. The Iron Brotherhood was about to prove that sometimes the most dangerous-looking people are exactly who you need when everything else has failed. They were about to show Tommy that real strength isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. And they were about to teach Tommy's stepdad a lesson he would never forget. The first thing Marcus did was call Diane, the club's liaison with local social services. Diane wasn't just any social worker. She was Thunder's sister, someone who had grown up around the Brotherhood and understood that sometimes unconventional solutions were the only ones that worked. "We've got a code red situation," Marcus said into his phone, using their term for child endangerment cases. 8-year-old boy, severe abuse, immediate danger. "We need you here now." While they waited, the Brotherhood formed a protective circle around Tommy. These weren't just random bikers anymore. They had become his shield, his army, his protectors. Each man was already thinking through their role in what was about to unfold. Raven, the club's tech specialist, was already running background checks on Tommy's stepdad using his phone. What he found made his jaw clench. David Morrison, 34 years old, had a history that painted a clear picture of escalating violence. 2 previous arrests for domestic assault, both charges mysteriously dropped. A restraining order from his ex-wife that expired last year. Multiple complaints to his workplace about aggressive behavior. "This guy's a walking time bomb," Raven muttered, showing the screen to Marcus. "And somehow he keeps slipping through the cracks." Diesel, who ran a legitimate security business, was already making calls to his contacts in law enforcement. Not all cops were willing to bend rules, but some understood that sometimes justice required creativity. Detective Sarah Chen had worked with the Brotherhood before on missing children cases. She owed them favors, and tonight, they were calling one in. Tommy watched this mobilization with wide eyes. In less than 20 minutes, these strangers had done more to help him than any adult in his life had done in months. They believed him. They took action. They treated his problem like it mattered. "Tommy," Marcus said, crouching down again, I need you to tell me exactly what happened last night, every detail you can remember. And I need you to be brave one more time and tell Detective Chen the same thing when she gets here." The story that came out was worse than they had imagined. Tommy's stepdad hadn't just been drinking and hitting. He had been systematically terrorizing the family, using psychological torture alongside physical violence. He would threaten to kill Tommy's pet rabbit if the boy made any noise. He forced Tommy's mother to account for every penny she spent and every minute she was away from the house. He had isolated them from friends and family, convincing everyone that they were a happy family, while destroying them behind closed doors. "He has cameras inside the house," Tommy revealed, a detail that made several bikers curse under their breath. "He watches us even when he's not there. Mama said that's how he always knows if we try to call for help or leave." This changed everything. They weren't just dealing with an abusive drunk. They were dealing with someone who was calculating, controlling, and dangerous in ways that went far beyond random violence. Detective Chen arrived within 30 minutes, her unmarked car pulling up beside the motorcycles. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for getting results when it came to protecting children. She had seen the aftermath of too many cases where the system had failed kids like Tommy. "What do we have?" she asked Marcus directly, skipping the usual formalities. She knew the Brotherhood well enough to trust their judgment when it came to situations like this. Systematic abuse, psychological torture, technological surveillance, and escalating threats of murder. Marcus replied grimly. "The kid walked miles in the dark to find us because he genuinely believes his stepdad is going to kill him and his mother." Detective Chen knelt down and spoke to Tommy with the kind of gentle authority that put children at ease. She had him repeat his story, asking specific questions that helped build a clearer picture of the situation. With each detail, her expression grew more serious. "Tommy," she said finally, "you were very brave to ask for help. Now I need you to be brave a little bit longer. We're going to make sure you're safe. But first, we need to get your mama away from that house." That's when they learned about the biggest complication. Tommy's mother worked the night shift at a local diner, and she wouldn't be home until after midnight. David Morrison would be alone in the house, probably drunk, possibly armed, and definitely dangerous. "He has guns," Tommy said quietly. "Lots of them. He showed them to Mama and said if she ever tried to leave or call the cops, he'd use them on both of us and then himself. He said nobody would ever find our bodies." The temperature of the entire situation dropped several degrees. This wasn't just domestic abuse anymore. This was a hostage situation involving firearms and credible death threats. Sledge stepped forward, his voice low and controlled. "This changes the game entirely. If he's armed and making murder-suicide threats, we can't wait for the system to work slowly. Every hour we delay puts that woman and kid in more danger." Detective Chen was already calling for backup, but she knew as well as anyone that official responses had limitations. They had to follow protocols, get warrants, coordinate with multiple agencies. All of that took time, and time was something Tommy's family didn't have. "There's another problem," Tommy added, his voice getting smaller. "He told Mama that if she's not home by 12:30, he's coming to find her at work, and if anyone tries to stop him, he'll make sure everyone pays." The diner where Tommy's mother worked was a small family business. The owner was an elderly man who stayed late to handle the books. The night shift waitresses were mostly single mothers trying to make ends meet. If David Morrison showed up there armed and angry, innocent people were going to get hurt. Marcus looked around at his brotherhood. These were men who had sworn oaths to protect the innocent and stand against evil. They had never faced a situation quite like this, but their training, their instincts, and their moral code were all pointing in the same direction. "Chen," Marcus said to the detective, "how much flexibility do you have in how this gets handled?" Detective Chen understood what he was really asking. "Officially, I have to follow procedure. Unofficially, I need to protect civilians. And if private citizens happen to provide assistance that helps me do my job, well, that's just good community cooperation." The plan that emerged over the next few minutes was unlike anything any of them had ever attempted. It required perfect timing, multiple moving parts, and a level of trust between law enforcement and the motorcycle club that most people would find impossible to believe. But Tommy's life depended on it. His mother's life depended on it, and possibly the lives of everyone at that diner depended on it too. The Brotherhood was about to prove that when the system fails, sometimes the people who look the most dangerous are exactly the ones you need. The clock was ticking toward 11 p.m. when Detective Chen made the call that would set everything in motion. All units, we have a domestic violence situation with credible death threats. Suspect is armed and has made statements indicating intent to harm multiple civilians. While she coordinated the official response, the Brotherhood split into 3 teams. Each group had a specific mission that would unfold simultaneously across the small town. The margin for error was 0. Team Alpha, led by Marcus, would handle the most dangerous part of the operation. They would position themselves around the house on Elm Street, creating a perimeter that would prevent David Morrison from leaving if he tried to run or hunt down Tommy's mother at the diner. Team Bravo, commanded by Thunder, had the mission of getting to the diner first. They needed to secure the location and make sure Tommy's mother was safe before Morrison realized something was wrong. Team Charlie, consisting of Diesel and 2 other members, would serve as rapid response. They would stay mobile, ready to reinforce whichever team needed backup when things inevitably went sideways. Tommy sat in Detective Chen's car, watching these dangerous-looking men transform into a coordinated tactical unit. "Are they really gonna stop him?" he asked quietly. "Son," Chen replied, "I've been a cop for 15 years. I've never seen anyone more determined to protect a child than these men right here. Your stepdad picked the wrong family to terrorize." At exactly 11:15, the operation began. Team Bravo roared toward the diner, their engines cutting through the night like thunder announcing a storm. They had 12 minutes to get there before Tommy's mother's shift ended, and she started her walk home. Meanwhile, Team Alpha approached Elm Street with their headlights off, using back roads and alleys to avoid detection. The house Tommy described sat at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by overgrown bushes and broken streetlights. It was the perfect place for someone to hide terrible secrets. Marcus used hand signals to position his team around the property. Raven, with his military background, took the high ground on a small hill behind the house. Sledge covered the front entrance, while 2 other members watched the sides. If Morrison tried to leave, he would find himself surrounded by very motivated bikers. Through the windows, they could see the flickering light of a television. Morrison was home, probably drinking, completely unaware that his reign of terror was about to end. At the diner, Thunder's team arrived just as Tommy's mother, Sarah, was finishing her last table. She was a thin woman with tired eyes and faded bruises on her arms that her long sleeves couldn't quite hide. When she saw the motorcycles pull up outside, her face went pale with fear. "Ma'am," Thunder said as he entered the diner, removing his helmet respectfully. "Are you Sarah Patterson?" "Who's asking?" she replied, instinctively backing toward the kitchen, where the elderly owner Pete was counting the day's receipts. "My name is Thunder. I'm here because your son Tommy asked us for help. He's safe, he's with a police detective, and we're here to make sure you stay safe too." Sarah's knees nearly gave out. "Tommy? Where is he? What happened? Did David find him?" "Ma'am, Tommy walked several miles tonight to find us. He told us everything about what's been happening in your house. The beatings, the threats, the cameras, all of it. We're here to help you end this nightmare." The relief in Sarah's eyes was immediate, but it was quickly replaced by terror. "You don't understand," she whispered urgently. "David has guns. Lots of them. He's told me exactly what he'll do if I ever try to leave or get help. He'll kill Tommy first, then me, then himself. He's not bluffing." Thunder had heard similar threats before in his military service. He knew the difference between empty intimidation and genuine deadly intent. Morrison's pattern of escalating control and violence combined with the weapons and surveillance, painted the picture of someone who was absolutely capable of following through. "Muka, Mrs. Patterson," Thunder said gently, "that's exactly why we're not giving him the chance. Right now, he thinks you're here finishing your shift and Tommy is home asleep. He doesn't know that both of you are protected and that his house is surrounded." Pete, the diner owner, had been listening from the kitchen doorway. "Sarah," he said, "I've been wondering about those bruises for months. I should have said something sooner." It's not your fault, Pete," Sarah replied, tears starting to flow. "David made it clear that if I told anyone or if anyone tried to help, he'd hurt them too. I couldn't risk putting you or the other girls in danger." That's when Thunder's radio crackled to life. It was Marcus from Team Alpha. "We've got movement inside the house. Subject appears to be pacing, possibly agitated. He keeps looking at his phone and checking the time." Thunder looked at the clock on the diner wall. It was 11:45. Sarah's shift was supposed to end at midnight, and she was always home by 12:20. Morrison was getting suspicious. "Sarah," Thunder said urgently, "does David expect you to call or text when you leave work?" "Yes," she nodded. "Every night. If I'm even 5 minutes late calling, he starts threatening to come looking for me." Thunder made a quick decision. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to send him your normal text message saying you're leaving work, but instead of going home, Detective Chen is going to pick you up here and take you somewhere safe." "But what about when I don't show up at home?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "That's where we come in," Thunder replied grimly. "When Morrison realizes you're not coming home, he's going to be angry. He might try to come looking for you here at the diner, or he might try to run. Either way, he's going to find out that his days of terrorizing your family are over." At exactly midnight, Sarah sent her usual text. "Leaving work now. Home in 20 minutes. Then she turned off her phone, grabbed her purse, and walked out to Detective Chen's unmarked car. Thunder's team followed Sarah and the detective to ensure they reached the safe house without incident. It was a small apartment that the Brotherhood kept for situations exactly like this, stocked with food, clothes, and everything a family might need to start over. Back at the house on Elm Street, Morrison was becoming increasingly agitated. Marcus watched through night vision binoculars as the man paced from room to room, checking his phone constantly. At 12:30, when Sarah should have been walking through the front door, Morrison started calling her number. The calls went straight to voicemail since Sarah had turned off her phone. Morrison's behavior became more erratic. He was drinking heavily, throwing furniture, and shouting at empty rooms. At 12:45, Morrison made the decision everyone had been expecting. He grabbed his car keys and headed for the front door, probably planning to drive to the diner to find his missing victims. But when David Morrison opened his front door, he found himself face to face with Marcus. The massive biker stood silently on the porch, arms crossed, eyes cold as winter steel. "Going somewhere, David?" Marcus asked quietly. Morrison tried to slam the door shut, but Sledge appeared from the side of the house, his boot preventing the door from closing. "Now a dangerous smile. That now," Sledge said, with not very neighborly. "Who the hell are you?" Morrison snarled, his voice slurred from alcohol. "Get off my property before I call the cops." "Funny thing about that," Marcus replied, stepping into the house uninvited. "The cops are already on their way. Seems like someone reported some domestic violence happening at this address. Multiple witnesses, recorded evidence, the whole package." Morrison's face went white. He knew exactly what that meant. His carefully constructed facade of being a respectable citizen was about to crumble. "I don't know what you're talking about," Morrison said, backing toward the kitchen where Marcus could see several firearms mounted on the wall. "Tommy told us everything," Sledge said, following Marcus into the house. "The beatings, the threats, the cameras you used to spy on your own family. We've seen the bruises on that little boy and his mother." Morrison's hand moved toward one of the guns, but he found himself staring down the barrels of two weapons that had appeared in the biker's hands faster than he could blink. "I wouldn't," Marcus said calmly. See, the difference between you and us is that we actually know how to use these things. Military training has a way of teaching you proper gun safety. The sound of sirens filled the air as Detective Chen and her backup units arrived. Morrison was trapped between armed bikers who had every legal right to defend themselves and law enforcement officers who had probable cause to arrest him. David Morrison, Detective Chen announced as she entered the house. You're under arrest for domestic violence, child abuse, terroristic threats, and illegal surveillance. As the handcuffs clicked around Morrison's wrists, Marcus leaned close to his ear. Here's what's going to happen, he whispered. You're going to prison. When you get out, if you even think about looking for Sarah and Tommy, you'll find us waiting. We don't forget, and we don't forgive when it comes to people who hurt children. Morrison's face went pale with terror. He had spent months terrorizing a woman and child, but now he was face to face with men who were genuinely dangerous and absolutely committed to protecting the innocent. The search of Morrison's house revealed an arsenal of weapons, recording equipment throughout every room, and journals detailing his plans to discipline Sarah and Tommy for any perceived disobedience. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, but the real breakthrough came when Raven, the tech specialist, examined Morrison's computer and phone. What he found made Detective Chen call for additional charges. Morrison had been planning something far worse than anyone had imagined. His browser history revealed searches for remote locations where bodies could be hidden. His phone contained photos of Sarah's workplace, Tommy's school, and even Pete's home address. This wasn't just domestic abuse, Detective Chen told Marcus as they watched Morrison being loaded into the police car. This was a man planning multiple murders. If Tommy hadn't been brave enough to ask for help tonight, we might have been investigating a triple homicide tomorrow. The Brotherhood had arrived just in time. One more day, maybe even one more hour, and Morrison might have acted on his violent fantasies. Tommy and his mother were reunited at the safe house as the sun began to rise. The little boy ran into Sarah's arms, both of them crying tears of relief and freedom. "So, Mama," Tommy said, "the bikers saved us. They didn't hurt anyone, but they made sure the bad man can't hurt us anymore." Sarah looked at Marcus with gratitude that couldn't be expressed in words. "How can I ever thank you?" she asked. "You don't need to thank us," Marcus replied. "You just need to live your life without fear. That's all the thanks we need." The Brotherhood had done something extraordinary. They had taken a desperate child's plea for help and turned it into a coordinated rescue operation that saved multiple lives. They had worked within the system while also going beyond what the system could accomplish alone. But their work wasn't finished. Morrison would eventually face trial, and Sarah and Tommy would need ongoing support to rebuild their lives. The Brotherhood was prepared for all of it. Tommy kept his $11, but he also gained something far more valuable. He learned that there are adults in the world who will protect children no matter what. He learned that asking for help isn't weakness, it's courage. And he learned that sometimes the people who look the most dangerous are exactly the ones you need when everything else has failed. The Iron Brotherhood had proven once again that real strength isn't about intimidation or violence. Real strength is about using your power to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Morrison would spend the next 15 years in prison. Sarah would eventually remarry a good man who loved both her and Tommy. And Tommy would grow up knowing that when evil seems unstoppable, sometimes guardian angels wear leather jackets and ride motorcycles. The story spread through their small town like wildfire. Within days, everyone knew about the little boy who had asked bikers to kill his stepdad and how the Iron Brotherhood had responded. But what most people didn't know was that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. 3 weeks after Morrison's arrest, Marcus received a phone call that would change everything. It was from a woman named Elena Rodriguez, and her voice was shaking with desperation. "And is this the motorcycle club that helped that little boy Tommy?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied carefully. "How can we help you?" "My daughter Sophia is missing," Elena said. her words tumbling out between sobs. She's only 12 years old. The police say she's probably a runaway, but I know something terrible has happened to her. She would never leave me willingly. Marcus felt his blood chill. Missing children cases were different from domestic violence situations. They were more complex, more dangerous, and the stakes were impossibly high. "Ma'am, when did you last see Sophia?" Marcus asked, already motioning for Thunder to start gathering the Brotherhood. 4 days ago. She was walking home from school. Same route she takes every day. Her backpack was found in an alley 3 blocks from our house, but there's no other trace of her. The police took a report, but they're treating it like she ran away because she's had trouble at school recently. Elena explained that Sophia had been struggling with bullies who targeted her for being different. She was a quiet, artistic girl who preferred books to social media, and that made her a target for cruel classmates. The police assumed she had simply decided to escape her problems by running away. "But you know your daughter," Marcus said, "and mother's instincts are usually right. She would never leave without her art supplies," Elena said firmly. "Sophia carries this old sketchbook everywhere. She draws constantly. It's like her security blanket. The fact that it was still in her backpack tells me she didn't leave voluntarily." Thunder had been listening to the conversation, and his expression was grim. Child abductions were every parent's worst nightmare and every law enforcement officer's most urgent priority. But they were also incredibly difficult cases to solve, especially when valuable time had already been lost. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said, "we're going to help you find Sophia. But I need you to understand that this is different from what we did for Tommy. This is going to require everything we have, and there are no guarantees." "I understand," Elena replied. "I've already sold everything I own to hire a private investigator, but he found nothing. The police have bigger cases to worry about. You're my last hope." Marcus made a decision that would push the Iron Brotherhood into uncharted territory. They were about to become amateur detectives, hunters of predators, and Sophia's last chance at coming home alive. That night, Tommy learned something that would stay with him forever. Real heroes don't always wear capes or badges. Sometimes they wear leather jackets and ride Harleys. Sometimes the most dangerous-looking people are exactly who you need when the world has failed you. The Iron Brotherhood proved that true strength isn't about violence or intimidation. It's about using your power to protect those who can't protect themselves. Tommy kept his $11, but he gained something worth infinitely more. He discovered that when evil seems unstoppable, guardian angels sometimes roar down the street on motorcycles, ready to stand between innocence and darkness. If this story moved you, smash that like button, subscribe for more incredible true stories, and let me know in the comments what you think about these modern-day heroes. Until next time, remember that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places.